So, Theo Millward, how are you doing today? Welcome to the Disenfranchised.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, really good. How about yourself?
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. Just balancing doing work in my garden with actually working on the business as well at the same time. So a little bit of a challenge, but all good other than that. And especially when the sun's out, it's not too bad to be outside for a little bit.
Yeah, it makes it a bit easier, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So let's get going with some of the questions then. And the first one, as always, is what was your first job?
So my very first job was when I was about 15 doing something called order picking, which, if those of you don't know what that is, it involves a warehouse where it's got loads and loads of shelves and rows of various products, and the different stores will say, I want 20 camera films and 15 pallets of Bic pens or whatever, and you literally roll around the warehouse pushing your trolley, picking everything the stores want. And it's total misery, but it's what you need to do at 15 if you want to go and see your favourite band at a concert and can't afford the tickets. So that's what I did.
Yeah, definitely. Which company was that you were doing it for?
Wincanton Logistics. There we go. I've no idea if they're still working at the time. I think they had the contract for, I'm going to say Safeway supermarkets, which no longer exists. But one of the supermarket chains we had the contract for.
Yeah, so that's they're Morrison's now, aren't they? Safeways, I
Yes, I
think.
believe so. I lose track of all this various consolidation with these big supermarkets. But yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it's now Morrison. So that was the first ever
Yeah,
job.
that's fair enough. I, I don't know if that's one of those jobs where you kind of just not mindless, but you know what I mean. You can almost do it on autopilot and just kind of just crack on. And yeah, it's not a career, is it?
It's
Necessarily.
not a career, no. And I was at the time, because I was still at school and stuff. I was just saving for pocket money basically to have fun and all that kind of stuff. And I remember the agency I worked for. I'll never forget this actually. They posted me at Boots, and Boots were having some kind of renovation. And anyone who's ever met me will know I'm quite slight in stature. So the thought of me doing any kind of manual labour is quite frankly hilarious. But I remember I got on site like before a few other people, and the site foreman was like, "All right, we need these big like huge lengths of like 3x2 moving across the site." I was carrying them across like one on each shoulder, just like getting it done. And then I remember bumping into some of the other people that were working there, and they actually told me off. Not told me off, but they were a bit grumpy. I was working too efficiently because it would make them look bad, and I never ever forgot that. Genuine story.
Amazing. I've heard the stories of that, but not directly from someone. That's just it's mad, isn't
It's
it? But
mad.
that I
It's
suppose,
mindset, isn't it? So in my mindset then, even at the age of 15, 16, was just get the job done. This job has to get done, smash it out, move on to the next one. And there's a group of people there who are just like, okay, how do we get through kind of, I guess, with the easiest way, with the least amount of effort. And I think it's just a very different take on life. It was, I'd never experienced it before. It was really weird to see, really, really
yeah,
strange.
it's interesting. So do you think that's something that's helped you to kind of get to where you are today? Then I guess that mindset. I mean, I guess it has really
Yeah, I
then.
think so. I kind of seen it all through my life in sports and anything I've done out of kind of business. I like working hard. I get a lot of kind of fulfillment from maximizing my potential, and so I like finding out where the line of my capability is. So that's one of the many reasons I push so hard. I think, when you look back on your life, whenever the end comes, or you're getting close to the end, you want to look back and say, yeah, do you know what, I took every opportunity, I smashed everything as hard as I could and haven't got any regrets. I think the worst thing is to look back and say, oh, I wish I'd worked 10% harder, or I wish I'd did this, because it's a pretty short time on this planet. You've only got one crack at it, so why not give it a go
Yeah,
and see how far you can get?
it's taking some pride in your work, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah, definitely. It's a really good word, actually. Yeah, pride's a good one.
Yeah, sure. And is that something that's come from kind of your family, or what do you think has made you like that as opposed to the other guys and girls who were perhaps trying to shirk a little bit, on the job.
Yeah, it's interesting one. I don't know. I mean, both my parents are really, really hardworking, like they're absolute grafters. So I think there's an element of genetics. The other thing I think was really interesting was I never got given a huge amount of pocket money, and so that really instilled a work ethic in me really, really early on. I remember even being like 12 or 13, and my dad was like, "Yeah, I'll give you some pocket money, but you need to wash the cars, or like you need to mow the lawn, or whatever it is." And it was instilling that thing that yes, you can have this, but you need to work for it. And I think that got drilled into me quite early on. I think that's a really healthy mindset. um, I think that's probably what it is. And then just maybe part of it is just how you're genetically made up. I guess it's the kind of two coming together.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to hear that though, because I'm trying to do that with my children a bit. Is not give them everything for free. They've got to do something, even if it's just take the washing out of the tumble dryer or something like that for us,
Yeah,
just to get them in that habit of they've got to work for everything. But well, that's cool. So into kind of education, then were you studying? Did you go to university?
yep. I read business at uni, which I'm not sure I'd necessarily recommend people do. I don't think I use a huge amount of those things I learnt then. I did a 4-year degree, which is kind of half a master's. So it's a bachelor with half a master's, and the sort of the extra year over traditional one is a year in industry. So I was lucky enough to get my placement for a year with IBM in central London, which is an amazing kind of first entry to sort of the full blown
Yeah,
workforce, aside from sort of the manual labour type summer jobs. Yeah, it was an amazing experience. I was really privileged. I was in kind of one of the consulting divisions, to work in some really, really big clients, getting real exposure to kind of big business and some of the big things that happen. And yeah, you're just a number. I'm not suggesting I have any real legacy from my sort of traineeship at IBM, but in terms of exposure and seeing these big principles, it was eye opening and pretty cool. Like when you're to how old I was, maybe 20, 21. It's pretty cool being in London, working for IBM, going in the head offices with all the glitz and stuff. It's a pretty good introduction to the world of work.
yeah, definitely. Do you think there was anything from that you've learned that sort of stuck with you today? Because obviously that big company culture is pretty structured, right?
Yeah, well, so I didn't like it basically. I remember the thing that kind of I didn't like about it was I felt like I was just a number, a cog in a machine. I remember
Yeah,
like chatting with a lot of my managers, kind of quite candidly being like, "Look, if I wasn't here, nothing would change." And that I don't want to take that away from people who do work for big businesses, because some people who really enjoy that and thrive in it and get a lot out of it. And obviously, without big businesses, we wouldn't enjoy a lot of things that we all, love today.
yeah, sure.
You need big entities. But for me personally, as an individual, um, I want to be able to make a direct impact. And I think to do that in that kind of corporate world, you've got to be really high up the ladder. And I think perhaps that wasn't quite for me.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. So at that point in time, did you kind of know where you wanted your career the direction you wanted your career to head into?
No, funny enough, I was giving a talk at my old school back on Friday about entrepreneurship and talking a bit about franchising as well to the students. And I didn't really identify as an entrepreneur until sort of my early 30s. So, whilst I probably was one, and you look back and you see these things that happen and you think, oh, yeah, it's so obvious, like that's really entrepreneurial. But I genuinely, even when I bought Swimtime, it was probably 2.5 years after I bought Swimtime when I suddenly realised, oh, actually, yeah, no, I am an entrepreneur, and that's who I was. And I only found that out because I was on a business accelerator, and someone just walked up to me and said, "You're an entrepreneur, you idiot." And I was like, "Oh, am I?" And it's just it sounds ridiculous because a lot of people know me now. It's obvious, but genuinely didn't think that was who I was for a long, long time. It's strange, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. For me personally, so I'm a couple of months into my journey of being self-employed, properly self-employed, and I'm looking back at the roles that I was doing before, and it's no different to what I'm doing now. I'm just doing it for me, right? So I would implement a new structure or process, or develop an idea and then go and test it, trial it, make it successful, and teach others how to do it. And that's exactly the same sort of skill set that you need, I think, when you're an entrepreneur, right? Is to go out there and forge the path for others to then follow and then show them. And I think it's very easy to not think of yourself as an entrepreneur when I guess you're kind of programmed in that business world, aren't you? That you're doing this because you're getting a salary, whereas there's a lot of other people that aren't doing that sort of thing, right? Who are maybe working in a larger organization, are kind of doing what they're told, I suppose, as opposed to going out there and being creative. So yeah, it's interesting you saying that. But so where did your career take you then in the end? So IBM in the consulting division. Where did you move on from there?
So I ended up, so obviously went back to university for my final year. You do that placement at IBM in year three. So first two years at sort of studying university, year three industry, year four back in campus. So I was back in university, and then I was president of the rowing team, and we desperately needed money. And I approached a local private student kind of lettings company, a company called City Block, which built quite substantial, literally tower blocks, effectively of student accommodation off-site, competing with the university. And I don't know how I came across this, but I realised that the university had banned, well, banned might not be the right word, but what the entrepreneur at the time said. He claimed that they'd been banned from advertising to the students of the university because they were competing with university accommodation. So I basically knocked on his door and was like, "Hey, we've got 60 to 100 quite tall, athletic people who get people's attention because they're 6 foot tall and 4 foot wide, as rowers tend to be. Why don't you stamp your logo all on the back of our rowing kit, because they come straight out of practice and then go into lectures, and you've got walking billboards going around that get interest from a lot of people." And yeah, he said yes. And then he also said, he basically said I was the only person to ever have the balls to ask him for quite a lot of money. And cutting a long story short, he ended up offering me a job. So for the first sort of couple of years of my career, I worked for this entrepreneur, which was eye-opening, and a complete opposite end to it. So you've got IBM on the one side, then you got this guy on the other.
Yeah,
You couldn't
sure.
have any more difference of kind of how people work and their methodologies. But yeah, I loved it. I mean, it was an unusual experience, but I'm really grateful I had it. Really, really grateful I had it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Sounds quite interesting, and I guess you've got more freedom, but also, working for an entrepreneur, you've got more freedom to implement these new projects and things like that. But I guess, did you find it was difficult to go from something that was a little bit more corporate and structured to that kind of freedom? Because it's almost scary, right? That you've got no guidelines to follow, no processes to follow. You've kind of got to go and create them your own. It's quite a big shift, and quite. Did you find that sort of scary, or how did you? Yeah, how did you find it?
Yeah, it's a question. For me, no, because my large part, particularly in the final year of a business course, I can't comment on all universities. I can only comment on my own, but it's quite vocational in nature, so it's quite project based.
Right.
So um, one of the things everyone talks about who does a business course, I think is quite common. We used to have something called airline. So the airline module is you literally get an airline to run using some computer program that somebody in the US developed, and each week you go with a team and you make decisions on pricing, routing, all this kind of stuff. It's quite iconic in business education, I think, and projects like that are very unstructured. So you kind of got used to it, and then on top of that as well, of course, I was president of the boat club, so that in a way
Yeah.
was like running a business, a small business. You have a team of volunteers that are unpaid, so it's all about motivation, about respect, about team building, all that aspect of business. You've got your own budget to run. You've got the health and safety aspect, the transport, the insurance. So it really was running a smallish business. So I'd kind of got exposed to that. So in many ways, I think I knew that was my natural calling. But I was actually or that's where I first got into software. So I actually launched a .com for him, albeit it was a spectacular failure commercially. But in terms of that was my first exposure to starting with a concept and working with a team of developers to bring it to market. That's where that side of my life very first started.
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, did that not put you off, that failure? Because whenever someone's about to start a new project, or not perhaps not everyone, but a lot of people, they kind of go, they get that imposter syndrome, don't they? Right, where it's never going to work, it doesn't work, and then when it doesn't work, they go, "Well, I knew it," and kind of hang up the hat and give up. So why did that not happen for you? Why did you kind of then go on? I guess, as we're discussing a bit, to kind of develop more IT sort of software solutions for people.
Yeah, I honestly don't have an answer for you, and I'm not trying to duck out of anything. It's failure's never phased me. I see failure as an opportunity to to take lessons and move on. It's actually something I embrace, and I actually try and encourage my team to have a safe space in which to fail. Obviously, you don't want to bet the bank, so to speak, but I think if you can
Yeah,
create a culture where failure is encouraged and is to an extent protected, I think that's the fastest way to learn and build resilience in a team. And I think it comes back to sport. If I go back to my own days or even sports that I do now, failure is part and parcel of every moment of it. It's actually about how you can
yeah,
regroup yourself, your mindset, analyze where you are, and reflect on what could have changed, and then implementing those changes next time round, and each time building on the layers. And so I can't answer it any more than that. I never remember thinking consciously, oh, this didn't work out, or this did. It was completely natural. It was like, okay, that didn't work. Move on to the next one. It's
let's go
it's
for the
it's
next
just
one.
organic in me.
Yeah. I guess then, though, maybe that's something that's kind of all these different elements that are piecing together to give you that kind of mindset, though, isn't it? Going through those projects during education, being self-employed and not being self-employed, working for an entrepreneur at this point. Yeah, I guess it all just starts to piece together to make you who you are to that point. And yeah, if it just becomes normal, that's a pretty good place to be. And I know a lot of people that sort of struggle to get around that. They like to have everything lined up and it has to be executed exactly, and then it actually, it has to work. Otherwise, it's the end of the world for them. So I don't know. Maybe you're lucky. Maybe it's just the way that you've had an experience kind of life in your career. Who knows? But yeah, it's good to hear that you did have that and could move on. Um, so that obviously now the managing director of Swimtime. So how did you get from that kind of early days with that entrepreneur to where you are now? Then.
It's a long story with lots of bumps in the road, but the short history is from leaving the entrepreneur, I ended up doing accountancy training in London for Grant Thornton, which is quite a major firm. I didn't get all the way through that. I'm a part qualified accountant, so I got through 11 of the 15 exams. I was doing that during the '08 crisis, so I think they were slightly more hot to fire the gun of getting rid of people. Fortunately, didn't get through that process the way I wanted to. Ended up working in the leisure sector for a number of years, which didn't go the way I wanted in some aspects as well, and ended up sort of around about 30, sort of at a bit of a lost end, really, kind of trying to find myself. And it's one of these moments that you just think, how did that happen? I remember sort of ringing up through most of my phone book and old contacts, and one of the people I rang up was a chap called Barry Price. Him and his wife, Barry and Linda, had founded Swimtime back in '98. And I picked the phone, just wanted to touch base, and we caught up and stuff. And he remembers where he was. He was in an underground car park in central Manchester. I remember where I was. I was at my parents' house. I think we were having Saturday lunch or something. And I remember looking over the view because they live in the countryside. And he just said, "Theo, you should buy a business." And I was sort of like, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, you should,
Did they say
you should
buy
buy this,
our business or buy a business?
buy our business,
Oh, right.
being
Okay.
Swimtime." And I was like, okay, let's have a chat about it. And that was it. That was Genesis. And about, I don't know how long the time was in that phone call and completing, probably 4 to 6 months, something of that sort of time frame. And yeah, March 2016 or April 2016 it would have been. That was it. I was officially a business owner, having never done
Yeah.
it
Wow.
before.
So, I mean, that's quite a big step, right? To just buy someone else's business without having, set up or run your own business before. But what was your role before that? I think I saw your CEA with the STA. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that was in the leisure sector. So that was effectively a quasi regulator in the swimming sector. So it wasn't completely alien to me. So Swimtime were one of our clients. I knew the prices really well. I'd known them for a number of years, had that relationship with them. So it wasn't sort of totally alien.
Yeah, but still, but how big was Swim Time at that point in time?
So network turnover, I think, was around the 3 mil mark, roughly. I don't know 100%, but I can't remember. But round about that sort of size. So approximately 20, mid-20s franchisees, roughly that sort of size, to give you an idea.
Yeah, that's quite a network to take on because it's not just staff because it's a franchise business at this point, right?
It was. It had a head office with approximately 5 or 6 staff in it,
Yeah,
up in Manchester. Um, yeah, I mean, again, I guess there's a theme already emerging of just like, why would you make that jump? Like it probably sounds crazy, but it didn't to me at the time, and it certainly didn't to Barry and Linda. And we obviously went through all the due diligence process. There was plenty of opportunity in that negotiation then to go, do you know what, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. This isn't the right fit, because for them it wasn't just an exit from a financial perspective. It was very much a custodian conversation. For them, they wanted a new owner to come in and give Swimtime a bit of a nip and tuck and take it on for its next chapter. So I guess it's very humbling that they felt, even with that lack of direct experience, that they felt that maybe I was the right guy for the job.
yeah, that's cool though. But I can already see kind of again those bits in your career that tie in to make it sensible transition for them because you've got the accountancy background, right? Where there's an element of it there. You've got the business education. you've worked with an entrepreneur before and seen how that side of it works. You're not afraid to take on projects. For them, it must have made perfect sense, really. But from I still think from your side, that's quite a mad concept for me to get my head around, to go and take on something that big for your first venture. So what I wonder is, what did you see in that business that made you think, yeah, this is something I want to take on. This is something that I want to maybe take that risk
So
on, because yeah,
yeah, there's two elements to it. What one is sort of a straight kind of almost commercial appraisal of value using fairly tried and tested commercial ratios. So you look at the accounts of a business. There is well trodden paths of valuation. You can look at various ways you can make improvements and efficiencies, and there's that aspect of it which we felt kind of looked good. The other side of it, I've been aware for some time, particularly in my previous role at SDA, that there was a big opportunity for consolidation in the sector and also smarter use of technology. And we'd sort of started to dabble with that at my previous role, never kind of quite managed to get where we wanted to do with it. So, and part of my frustration of that was that that wasn't my organisation, so I didn't have total autonomy. So one of the appeals of this was that I would have my autonomy to actually kind of set out a vision and not need to convince lots of stakeholders that it's the way to go. Because to me, it'd been self-evident for some time it was the way to go. So yeah, I think it was those two things combined.
That's quite interesting, because I don't think the first thought someone has when they think of so Swimtime, just to be clear, is swimming classes for children, extracurricular, right? So it's in the weekends, I'm guessing, maybe evenings, something like this. But your first thought doesn't go to, it's a technology style business, or there's lots of technology involved. You just think of the swimming teachers that are there, and the lessons they're delivering to kids, and yeah, there's not much technology. It doesn't seem to be on the face of it, right? So yeah, how
Therein
did you
lies
kind
the
of
opportunity, Ed.
yeah? So what areas of that business then did you think technology could help?
I'm so glad you asked. It's almost like you teed this up. I know you didn't. So, and I talk a lot about it. I'm really privileged. I've got lots of things in my life I'm really privileged to. But one of the things I'm particularly privileged about, I get to talk a lot about this kind of all over the world. I get invited to do keynotes and stuff, and I love talking about it. So this is a very great question that I can summarize. So the history behind it, I remember when we first bought Swimtime and kind of went into the kind of the head office, and I remember observing the booking process of customers coming to book lessons. And there was sort of a general phone line that people could use. They either could contact local franchisee, or was a general line as well. But I remember observing how somebody was working through that process, and I timed them. I timed them over, not in a kind of like a weird way, but I was interested. Like, how long does it take? And we spent a few days and weeks, doing some sort of various analysis, and we ended up being approximately 15 minutes, 1-5, to book a kid on. Now, I don't
Yeah,
believe you need to be an entrepreneur or be particularly, commercial to realise that's mental, and that's
yeah,
not sustainable for scalability. It's bad for the client, because most clients don't want to spend 15 minutes booking a swimming lesson. It's a grotesque waste of time and money. And from a commercial aspect, it's very inefficient. So that was something that obviously needed looking at. So that's the one side. Now, the other piece of it, which is where I've probably got a slightly different lens on it, is I try to look more holistically at the customer journey. So the thing that's always inspired me as an entrepreneur is how Steve Jobs, for example, turned what used to be very unsexy and uncool, being computers, and you think back to the Windows days. That shows how old we might be for the
yeah,
young
yeah,
people watching this, and how he turned technology into a sexy, Instagrammable thing. You think about the iPhone, iPads, the Mac, and all that, and what he did that company from near bankruptcy to, until a few days ago, the most valuable company in the world. And how he did that, in my opinion, was he controlled the entire customer journey. So not just the bit in the middle that does what it's going to do. If you look at how Apple marketed the product, how they raised awareness, the whole ecosystem was incredible. So I tried to say, well, okay, well, if you could do that with that, what lessons could I perhaps take out of that and put into another less sexy market? Which I think is fair to say, most people don't go swimming lessons. That's what's going to get me, revved up for the day.
yeah,
And we looked at a very basic customer journey, from the moment somebody thinks about, I might want swimming lessons, to the moment that they might leave after a number of years with us. And we mapped that out, and we said, okay, which of these things basically could be done by a computer? And we very quickly realised if we take away the kid gets wet bit and the teaching bit, which is sacrosanct and must be protected, and that relationship and the human stuff is brilliant. If we remove that and keep that in a bubble, we look at all the other bits. There isn't really any reason that a computer couldn't either completely control that or certainly go through it like a hot knife through butter. And the tipping point for me was when you got a lot of car insurance companies, and if you think back to We Buy Any Car and brands like that, where they say, we'll get you
Yeah.
a quote in 60 seconds, or Booking.com, you could book a hotel in 60 seconds. I remember saying to my team, if I could do that, there is absolutely no reason why I can't do it with a swimming lesson. And that's the target I said. Book a swimming lesson in 60 seconds using a mobile phone. And that is how it started.
Yeah, yeah, and you know what? It makes a lot of sense. I've spent many occasions on the on the customer side with a leisure centre, let's say, trying to book a squash court or book something, and you're just like, why am I listening to hold music? It should be so much easier. And so I think we're in this world where we're used to having things instantly, and I mean, you can get food delivered to your door in 20 minutes, can't you, with a click of a button? So um, uh, yeah, you're right. Taking that kind of unsexy kind of environment, maybe, and making it more efficient. Yeah, it just means it's another headache that a person hasn't got in their life, And I think that if you can remove that before anyone else does, especially, it's going to give you an advantage. So definitely makes a lot of sense. But swim time then, whereabouts are you based? I know you said it started with 20. How many franchisees do you have now, and what sort of coverage across the UK do you have?
Yeah, so I think it's a slightly misleading question to ask. I don't mean that in any disrespect. So what we've actually done is transition to a more multi-unit model. So we actually have
Right.
less franchisees, but they're much bigger. So we've got approximately 30-ish active territories at the moment, roughly, but they are quite large. We have a number who will be doing £1 million a year each
Wow.
in swimming lessons. So probably three or four heading for that sort of number. We're on track for 6.5, 7 million turnover at the moment as we're exiting out the pandemic. So the stat I like to roll out at the moment, which is absolutely true, post-pandemic compared to pre, our network is 50% bigger, which
Wow.
is astonishing,
Yeah.
absolutely astonishing. So it's in a very interesting place, very interesting place. We're really proud of what we've achieved.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And so from that, then what we're talking about, these the franchisees that you have, they're not sitting there teaching the lessons, right? They're managing multiple areas where there's probably I don't know, 6 teachers in each class or something like this, right?
Correct. Some do teach themselves, and we don't discourage that. Particularly, typically, if we've got, I'm thinking of a lady called Hannah who's just recently bought a territory in Shropshire, North Wales. Um, she's a teacher, sort of really capable. It's a great way to kind of get into the business and get it started. But certainly, what we look to do for our franchisees is move them to a management model as you described. So our aspiration for them is that they run substantial businesses. They are really looking at the efficiency and the customer service and really giving that sort of gold standard. And they shouldn't, it's entirely up to them, but there's no reason for them to teach. If they want to teach and that's important to them, that's fantastic. We support that, but there's no reason from a business perspective that you need to be a swimming teacher to come and run a Swimtime franchise. And there's lots of our franchisees that aren't, and they're highly successful.
Sure. And I'm guessing they don't need to even necessarily come from the leisure industry, or is that
No,
is that
no,
a necessity? No. Okay, so it's
no,
kind
not
of
at
like
all.
an added bonus, maybe. But I guess anyone with a business mind is the main thing you're looking for, and the ability to deliver service with a team, a great service with a team.
Absolutely, yeah. It's said it's highly scalable. We tend to look at the culture of the individual. Part of our franchise recruitment process, we have some psychometric tests and stuff. Not to be sort of auditorial, but for us, we'd much rather it's the right fit and it's the right decision for both parties than fire like a shotgun and say, yeah, we'll take your money, thanks very much, and then 6, 12 months down the line realise actually this isn't what that person expected. So we do put a lot of effort into making sure it really is the right fit for both parties, because I actually think that personally, I think that's the right thing for franchising, not just for us, because I think it's important that we, as a sector, we come together and champion the highest standards, because it's our sector and we should fly the flag high for making sure it's where it needs to be.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned the pandemic there, and obviously a challenging time for many people. I imagine it was for Swimtime franchisees at that point, because kids can get to the classes.
Yeah.
So what kind of changed with the business then, and what did you focus on?
Yeah. Okay. So this is the story of all stories. So yeah, we were. I think it's fairly well evident, with the lockdowns that were put through by the Prime Minister, the impact on us, as there were for many of our colleagues and many businesses in a similar line to us. So we were completely shut down for months on end. The revenue loss for us was in the millions and millions and millions across the network, and we essentially climbed into a shell and hunkered down to weather the storm. So we obviously were fortunate to take advantage of the furlough scheme for some of our head office team because there was nothing to do. We used our technology to freeze all our monthly payments, so no customers were charged, and there was a skeleton team that were just keeping our customers updated as best we could. And as a friend from a franchisor perspective, we flipped really to supporting our network kind of emotionally and from a mental health perspective, because obviously there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of concern. One thing I think we did do a very good job on. Part of this, I think, was an element of luck. Part of it was good leadership. But we had worked very closely with insurers a number of years prior to get really good insurance in place for our network. It was optional. We never mandated it. About 60 to 75% of the network mandated it, and we were, I believe, we're the only kind of kids activity brand I'm aware of. That doesn't mean this isn't exclusively the case. I'm the only one I'm aware of where we got business interruption payments. So we
Oh,
were
wow.
part of that famous Hiscox High Court thing. So a number of our franchisees got substantial 10-figure payouts, which saw them through. So yeah, a mixture of luck and a mixture of good
Bit of
leadership
foresight.
from myself and the team. But that's obviously was really really good. Where the story gets interesting was, we were staring at the black abyss. You see an amount of cash in the balance sheet. The government support, as we all know, as small business owners, was nowhere near enough. And the government's like, oh, here, I have a 15 grand grant. Jesus Christ, I mean, last 2 weeks, multi-million pound business didn't do anything. And I could just see this abyss opening up, and I remember, for 10, 15 days thinking, shit, what are we going to do here? And it was a really worrying time. I honestly thought we were in big trouble. And I thought, well, the best thing to do is I'm not going to mope around and watch Netflix. And I think maybe this is where possibly we first met Ed, but the franchise mastermind was a group that had been set up by Sean and Adam. Jumped into that and just started chatting to people, just standing people out, and it suddenly emerged to me a lot of people had the same issue that we'd previously had around tech. So a lot of people were like, well, I don't know how to kind of engage customers in a way that they used to, because as we know, during the pandemic, it went even more digital than it had before. And we've got this amazing technology we built ourselves. I know we've not talked about that yet, but we built this tech, and I was like, we've got this tech here. And then somebody said, well, can we have it? And I was like, okay. And literally at that moment, it was like, ping, we need to create a software company. Why not in the middle of a
Yeah.
pandemic? So I got the team together and I was like, right, here's the deal. It's going to be a tough sell this. I've got no money. I've got a possible lead to somebody may or may not want the software. We're going to have to spend 8 weeks completely getting everything started from scratch. Like, we have no brand, no name, no marketing material, no website, nothing. I don't know if I can afford to pay you. Brand new business. I will pay back any money that you work on now. You don't have to do this, but do you want to volunteer and just give this a go? And they were like, yep, okay. So I was like, oh, wow, didn't think that would go well.
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
we all grafted together and we started a software company from scratch in April 2020, and that is Franscape, and it has gone off like an absolute rocket. And we're just over 2 years on now, and it will be bigger than Swimtime probably by the end of this year, early next in size. It is
Wow.
off like an absolute steam train, and it's been
That's
the most insane experience, and it blows my mind. It still doesn't feel real, but I'm just incredibly grateful. And all the team
yeah,
have been
that's
paid back, and Swimtime survived. It's an unbelievable story. I don't know how I did it. No idea how I did
fantastic.
it.
But I think that's down to the kind of you developing the business earlier on, though, isn't it? As you're trying to keep up to Swimtime up to speed, developing it as a brand and moving it forwards into the modern world, I guess. That's then created an opportunity for you somewhere else, and I mean, it's amazing that the staff, were willing to work for free to start off with. But I guess that in a way was almost the good fortune from the pandemic for you, if you see what I mean. So
Yeah,
it is quite an amazing story, really, isn't it? Because uh,
yeah.
who,
It
how many tech companies have started from a swimming business, so to speak?
Yeah,
There's
it's
not many.
it
Yeah,
ends up it causes all sorts of weird things. It creates an identity crisis really amongst well, what are we now? One of the sort of things I used to do to be a bit provocative was like I used to say we're not a swimming company, we're a tech company that happens to teach swimming lessons. That's what I used to say before Franscape, and yes, I believe in that, but it's not something I'd go out to our customers. I did it to be sort of slightly provocative to get the sector talking, which worked at the time. Um, but maybe that is what we've been all along. It's weird because people don't see the fact it can be mutually exclusive. They assume you're either tech and you give no care for people and for culture and for team, or you're completely culture and you're a bit woo or whatever phrase people use these days. They don't get that actually the two can come together. I'm not trying to replace teachers with robots. At the end of the day, the most important thing we do is we have amazing teachers delivering incredible experiences to children all across the country. That will never change. All I'm trying to do is enable them, to empower them to do the best job they possibly can by taking pointless admin off them. But
I
whenever I
was going to
speak
say.
to people about it, they think it's a binary choice, and it's not. It is frustrating because I've got so much data that I think proves what we're doing works and is responded to by the clients, but there's a sector, there's quite a large portion of the sector I think I still need to try harder to convince, and I'm very open to suggestions on how we get that message across. But this is the way the world's going. It's undeniable, in my view.
I think what you're doing is you're letting the people that are good at that side of it, that teaching, that care for the children, that 1-to-1 or 1-to-5, whatever the interaction is, let them deal with that part and allow them to do that more by like you say, taking away the headaches, the stress. Because I guarantee you, none of them like filling in paperwork and all that sort of stuff, will they? They're there to be to support the children, to interact with them, teach them, and help them gain a life skill. They're not there to fill in admin forms. So Franscape, from what I did on my research, it looks like for the customer, it's quicker and easier, as you say, in less than 60 seconds to book a meeting. But then all the payments internally, they're kind of distributed instantly, aren't they? Rather than having to go into the franchisor's account or somebody collect it on site, and take the money and go somewhere else. It's paid online, and then the payment to the franchisor is done, the payment to the franchisee is done, and everything is automated, which I guess it makes it easy for your staff as well, right? They don't have to be chasing up franchisees, and franchisees don't have to find time to make those payments. It's making it more easy for everybody in the whole process.
Yeah, I mean, without getting too high on my own hyperbole, it's totally game changing. I mean, even from a purely
Yeah,
fiscal perspective, depending on how your business is running, you're going to get at least 4, possibly 12, maybe even 16 weeks of free cash. Because if you're most franchisees work in arrears, so a service takes place over a period of time, that time period ends, the franchisee sends a return, the franchisor says you owe me X, and then eventually it comes into the bank. That process could be 3, 4, 5 months between the service taking
yeah,
place. We flip that model on its head, so the franchisor is suddenly getting cash immediately. With Swimtime, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds of free flowing cash flow that was essentially just moved forward. And even the cost of capital, even with interest rates as low as they have been, that numbers is quite a lot. Um,
yeah,
Aside from the big point, and I know it's a bit of an elephant in the room, is around honesty and integrity in the network. We have not yet had a customer who's put Franscape in who hasn't seen their revenue go up almost overnight. And whilst I'm not claiming to be able to prove this, and I don't want to get into a whole libel issue here, but I'm going to stick my neck out and say that's probably to do with an under declaration issue. And Franscape kills that stone dead. You can't fiddle unless you're doing something incredibly sophisticated. And yeah, if you're running a completely separate system, obviously there's nothing I could do about that. But if you were not putting the odd one through, Franscape has algorithms that you can see some of the differences in performance to help you identify it. And even with Swimtime, our revenues went up overnight because you can't game the system.
H-
Um,
how how did your franchisees take it? The software being
Ed,
implemented.
that is a long story. The simple answer is not overly brilliantly to start with, but now they're very, very pleased. I think the change process is obviously very, very challenging. I'm very fortunate to have an amazing team. I think you've interviewed Rachel Brooks before, who's the Swimtime
Yes.
operations director, who is just a walking legend at this, and she's very much the brains behind how we work that process, and she's been an amazing support for this transition. But as we've been through this now with different brands, we're getting better and better at understanding the pain points. So when we bring other brands on, again, it sounds a bit cheesy, and I'm sorry, you can shoot me afterwards, but we try and be a partner. So it's more than just a software provider, because we're franchisors ourselves, and because we've now seen this journey a number of times. We can say, actually, this is the different ways people did the rollout. That worked, that didn't, that did. And we actually discuss with the network and say, I tell you what, why don't you use that template? We've literally got templates of emails, templates of FAQs, templates of videos. So we're getting a lot better at breaking that barrier down. But in answer to your question, it was pretty bumpy the first 6 months or so. But as you probably gathered, I don't take no for an answer. So, we spent a lot of time putting a case together, but I got to a point after 6 months of listening, focus groups, round tables, of going, this is the way we're going. I believe it's the right thing for the business. We've discussed it enough now. It's happening. And we ended up being quite assertive. But that's sometimes what you need to do. And I don't regret that, because the business is where it is today, I think, because of that approach.
Yeah, and I guess that if they're now seeing the benefits of it, they can't have too many complaints, right? So
Well, let's put it this way, Ed. We've never had £1 million businesses in the history of Swimtime until the year that's just closed. So I remember standing in front of my franchisees and saying, look, franchising is really simple. If you get rich, I get rich. So whilst you might not like what I'm doing, my entire motivation is to make you richer. So just remember that when you're getting upset about something I'm doing. Just remember, I want you to make as much money as possible, because that's how I make my money. And that's something I repeat to my network over and over again when we're dealing with a concept that might be slightly edgy or whatever, or maybe they're struggling to get their heads around it. That's the beauty of franchising. It is a partnership.
yeah.
It's that relationship working together, and I think we can demonstrate that.
Okay, great stuff. So, what's the next stage of development for Swimtime and for Franscape? What's the direction? Because I get the feeling you're not going to just sit there and go, fantastic, we've done everything now we can with this business. Let's leave it as it is and keep it ticking over. You're going to have plans, and I don't want you to give
Yeah,
all the secrets away, but what kind of direction are you heading in with these businesses?
yeah. It's a limit to probably what I want to share at this stage, other than there are some very interesting opportunities with the data that we have for both businesses. I'll give you one thing that we haven't made a decision yet how we're going to go with it, but we're exploring it as a concept, which is around personalised learning. There's some very interesting things around that, about understanding a customer's medical needs, their educational needs, and how we can adapt the programming to suit them dynamically. And we can use technology to help us understand the relationships between certain conditions and certain things that yield better responses. So we're working with data scientists at the moment to try and get a real deep dive, because you can imagine we've got huge amounts of data. That obviously has a really interesting societal play on inclusivity, around helping health outcomes. And that's something that I'm really interested in, because all of this ultimately is about trying to move society forward. It sounds quite grandiose, but I genuinely believe extracurricular activities generally, not just swimming, but in the main, are a really important part of young people's education. Sport was a main part of my life for a long, long time, and it helped me get through difficult parts of my life. And I think if more young people get access to this, it maybe will help stem the tide on the mental health crisis we have with young people, the inactivity crisis we have with young people, which ultimately puts burdens on the NHS and affects us all as taxpayers. So even if you haven't got children, or you're not bothered, it affects us all in one way or another. So anything we feel we can do to help that and move that forward is something we're really interested in trying to tackle.
Sure. So, I mean, I've seen you've got quite a structured program of training. There's also the reward system for the children, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is are you almost breaking it down into smaller individual groups to tailor it to the individual child, or are you? Yeah, I just kind of try to get my head around that bit.
So yeah, it's a difficult one, because it really is conceptual at this stage. But what we know at the moment is we have incredibly rich data sets where we are seeing patterns of behaviour. When I say behaviour, I mean attainment. So if you take an EL1, which is one of our awards that we have, to get an EL1, you have to do 10 things. So, it might be float on your back for 5 litres or whatever it might be. Each of our awards have these various things that the child has to achieve to get there. We have the capability to understand how long it takes for a child to get to those various bits. And then on top of that data, we can overlay other data, for example, medical, etc. So from there, we can start to build a relationship between the different data sets. And we are interested in if we can determine patterns around what children are responding to different types of education. Maybe there's nothing there, but we know in other sectors in health, if you look at how they're treating cancer and other types of chronic conditions, they are now looking at relationships between different parts of lifestyle to see if we can unpick the code of how somebody goes through a particular journey. I'm quite confident that there will be some secrets in the data that will help us understand how we can support young people better. That probably sounds like a politician's answer because it's purely in the kind of R&D stage. But we've already got some data models running at the moment that are giving us some indications, and we're now starting to test those indications to see if they're right. And if they're not, we'll go back in it and have a look again.
I think it's fascinating. I think it's really interesting that when you look at a brand straight off on the face of it, when you dig down underneath, they're all different, right? Because you might just think, okay, teaching swimming lessons, they're all pretty much the same. It's just the logo that's different or something like this. But I think if I were to dig into another swim brand, that's maybe franchise or not, I'm not sure it'd have the same level of detail in terms of the data that you're going through to try and make those improvements at the front end, so to speak, so or the delivery side, So I think it's really interesting what you're doing with the business, and I hope everything continues to go fantastically well with for you and Swimtime and Franscape as well, of course. But we're coming towards the end of the hour, so I'm going to ask my standard 3 questions, and hope we've got enough time to do it. But the first one is, are there any funny, strange, or weird stories from your career that you're happy to share?
I'm trying to think ones that are actually suitable for broadcast. They don't involve me. So where I typically, I'll just give a bit of a caveat around this. Where I typically, actually, I will tell this one, but I'm going to keep it about as anonymous as I can because it involves a very early part of my career, and it wasn't for any businesses I have now. I seem to attract odd complaints about other people that somehow come across my desk to look at, and one of the complaints I received was about, and it was a complete allegation that a member of staff was, let's just say, allegedly was doing things they shouldn't do with their pets. That's all I'm going to say.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know how these things happen to me. You get these moments and you're just like, what? And it was one of these things when I went through and you get to go through this. I tried to be very professional. I was like, well, have you seen it? No, I just heard a rumor. Okay, have you seen any evidence? No. Did it happen on company property?
Why bring it to you?
This is what I said. I literally said, why are you telling me this? Like, I said, have you contacted the RSPCA? No. Okay. Well, that's probably the most bizarre thing that's ever happened to me. You weren't expecting that one, were you?
But like, how do you deal with it? Like, what can I do with that? Like, that is mental, isn't it?
I think a lot of people know me. I've got quite a sharp sense of humour, but actually in these situations, I'm normally pretty good at just kind of almost not taking it as you should in terms of listening, trying to break it down structure. I wasn't sort of there, laughing and bawling and sort of, telling them to whatever. You just listen, ask sensible questions to determine, is this something I really should be taking seriously? And as by your reaction, very quickly I realised I don't, it is at best hearsay, at worst it's made up, and it's like there is no evidence, there's nothing. So that's probably the most bizarre thing that's ever happened.
Yeah, that's crazy. That is definitely crazy. So the next question is, what's been your proudest or most inspiring moment?
Probably when the team agreed to volunteer to start up with Franscape.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. Like, you're so lucky. Sorry to say it, but well, I guess there's not complete luck because they obviously believe in you in the project and where it could go. But and trust in you as well to do it for free initially, with the view that it might get paid further down the line. But that's pretty awesome. That's a good one. So that then leads us on to the final question then, which is, if you were speaking to somebody who's about to invest in a franchise license, whether that's Swimtime or anybody else's, what would be the most important piece of advice you would give to them? The one piece of advice you'd give to them?
Do your due diligence, and I would point them straight to the BFA. You know, go and immerse yourself and educate yourself and really make sure you understand franchising, what franchising is. And the reason I say that, because I'm sure colleagues will, if they get this far, they might have turned off on the last bit actually, because it's a bit odd. But if they've got this far, it's always a message for all of our colleagues. We are stronger together if we promote high standards. And I think the one thing that I get frustrated by is when you go through these various networking events, like, oh, how many franchisees have you got? How many franchisees have you got? And I understand why that question's asked, but I believe it's the wrong question. Because it's quite easy to sell franchises to lots of people by, you know, I've got to stand safe ground here, but you know, in terms of the sale, if you're very good at sales, you know, that could be better. Do you know what I mean? So I think actually selling it to the right people who should be buying it is really important for the sector. So yeah, my message is do your due diligence and go and visit places like the BFA and really get an understanding of what you're doing and make sure it's the right thing for you.
Yeah, and on that point, really, I guess make sure that the franchisor that you're speaking to is as invested in you as you are in them. You know, make sure they're asking you questions. If they're not asking you questions about your plans and what you want to do, I think it's a little bit of a red flag, right? That they're just trying to sell the license and move on.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
All right. Fantastic. Well, Theo, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, your career, and Swimtime, Franscape, and what your plans are. And yeah, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Ed. Appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Cheers.